John couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. He tried to brush off their encounter as nothing more than a weird, unsettling experience, but something in the back of his mind kept nagging him. How could someone be so confident about something so impossible? A future with an alien woman? He didn't know whether to laugh or be afraid. Either way, the thought refused to leave his mind. The next few days were a blur. John returned to his usual routine, trying to focus on his work and his personal life, but his mind kept drifting back to that strange moment at the convention. The glowing device Lyra had handed him was still sitting on his desk. He hadn't touched it since, almost as if it were some kind of alien artifact that he wasn't ready to deal with, but he couldn't ignore it forever. Curiosity got the best of him, and one evening, after a long day at work, he finally picked it up. The smooth surface of the device felt cold against his fingertips. As he held it, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important about it, something that went beyond the bizarre claim Lyra had made. He sat down at his desk and turned the device over in his hands. It was small and sleek, with intricate designs that seemed to shift when he looked at them. It didn't look like anything he'd ever seen. There were no buttons, no obvious way to turn it on. Just a soft, pulsing light that seemed to beat in time with his heartbeat. After a few moments, the light flickered and a soft voice came through the device, startling him. "John Miller," it said in a calm, almost hypnotic tone. "You are the one. The prophecy speaks of you. The future awaits." John jumped back, almost dropping the device in surprise. It was her voice, Lyra's voice. How was this possible? He could barely comprehend what he was hearing. The device was speaking to him, as if it were alive, as if it had been waiting for him to finally acknowledge it. His first instinct was to dismiss it, to turn it off and pretend none of this had ever happened. But deep down, something inside him told him that ignoring it wasn't an option. "Lyra, what the hell is going on?" he muttered to himself, as if expecting an answer. There was a brief silence. Then the voice returned, softer this time. "You are connected to the fate of my people, John. Your life is not as simple as you think. You are more than just a man." John exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to be terrified or intrigued. He had never been one to believe in fate, let alone prophecies involving aliens. It all seemed too unreal. But the truth was, he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward the mysterious woman. He couldn't shake the feeling that something larger than him was at play. He decided to investigate. There had to be a logical explanation, right? Maybe Lyra was just some kind of performer or artist who had staged the entire thing. Maybe the device was a high-tech gimmick, some sort of performance art. The next day, John set out to find Lyra. He visited the convention center again, hoping to find some clue that could explain what had happened. But when he arrived, the place was completely different. The booths were gone, and the building was eerily quiet. It was like the event had never taken place. No signs, no banners, no reminders of the strange encounter he'd had just days ago. He walked around the empty halls, feeling a sense of unease grow inside him. He stopped by the area where he had met Lyra, hoping to find some trace of her, but there was nothing. No one knew who she was. No one had seen her. It was as if she had vanished without a trace. Frustrated and confused, John returned home, feeling more lost than ever. Was it all just a dream? Had he imagined the whole thing? He grabbed the device from his desk, hoping it would provide some answers. As soon as his fingers brushed the smooth surface, the voice returned. "You came back, John," it said, as if it had been expecting him. "You must understand, the prophecy is real. You are my chosen one, and together we will save my people." John stared at the device, his mind reeling. "What do you mean, save your people?" he asked, his voice shaky. Who are you? What is going on? The device hummed, and for a moment, he thought he heard the faint sound of a heartbeat. I am Lyra, the voice replied. I come from a world far from yours. My people are dying. We have been waiting for you. Only together can we stop the darkness that threatens us all. John's heart raced. He wanted to deny it, to turn away from the strange reality that was unfolding, but there was something about the way the voice spoke that felt real, too real to ignore. Why me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm just an engineer. I'm nobody special. The voice was silent for a moment before answering. You are special, John. You may not see it now, but the future you hold is greater than you can imagine. You and I are bound by fate. You are the key to saving both our worlds. John felt a wave of panic wash over him. What was he supposed to do with this? How could he be the key to saving an alien race? He was just a man with a normal life. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't special. He was just John. But the device didn't give him a chance to argue. The light pulsed again, and the voice spoke once more. You will come to understand. Your journey begins soon, John Miller. There is no turning back. John looked at the device in his hands, feeling the weight of the words sink in. The strange encounter wasn't a joke. It wasn't some elaborate trick. It was real. And somehow he was part of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The days following the strange message from the device were a blur. John couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been turned upside down. Everything had felt normal, predictable even, until Lyra and her cryptic prophecy had entered his world. Now, he couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was happening, something bigger than he could understand. It was as though the universe had chosen him for something he wasn't ready for. He had tried to go back to his usual routine, work, dinner, a bit of TV to unwind, but nothing felt right. The device sat on his desk, always within reach, reminding him that his ordinary life had become a distant memory. He couldn't concentrate on anything, his thoughts constantly drifting back to Lyra. Who was she really? What was her world like? And why had she chosen him? One evening, after yet another restless night of tossing and turning, John finally decided to take action. He needed answers. If there was even a hint of truth to what Lyra had said, he couldn't afford to ignore it. He grabbed the device and headed out the door. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he knew he had to find her. John's search took him to places he hadn't expected. He visited the convention center again, hoping to find any trace of Lyra or someone who could explain the bizarre events. He asked around, but no one had any memory of her. It was as if she had never existed. The more he searched, the more hopeless it seemed. She had vanished, leaving him with nothing but questions. But just as he was about to give up, he received a message on his phone. It was an unknown number, but the message itself was unmistakable. John, meet me at the park near your apartment. I've been waiting for you. He didn't hesitate. There was no turning back now. The thought of seeing Lyra again filled him with a mix of excitement and dread. What would she say? What would she want from him? John arrived at the park just as the sun was beginning to set. The evening air was cool, and the park was quiet, almost deserted. He wandered through the paths, his heart pounding with every step. Then he saw her. Lyra was standing near a large oak tree, her silver hair catching the fading light. She looked like she belonged there, as if she had always been a part of the world, even though he knew she was far from it. Lyra, he called, his voice shaking slightly. She turned to face him, her purple eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. John, she said, her voice soft but certain. I knew you would come. John approached cautiously, unsure of what to say. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? His voice was filled with frustration, confusion, and a growing sense of helplessness. "I've told you before," she replied, her expression serious. "You and I are meant to be together. Our fates are tied. The prophecy is clear." She stepped closer, her presence commanding yet comforting. "You're the key to saving my people, John. It's not something I can explain in a few words, but I promise you, you'll understand soon." John shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. This is insane. I'm just a regular guy. I don't even know what you're talking about. Why me?" Lyra's gaze softened as she reached out, gently touching his arm. Her touch was cool, but there was an undeniable warmth to it, like she was trying to reassure him. "I know this is hard for you to believe, but you've been chosen. You've always been a part of this, even before you knew it. My people have seen it. The future is set in motion, and you are an important part of it." "Chosen for what?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To be your husband?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, in a way. But it's not just about us. It's about the survival of my entire species. There is a great darkness that threatens us, something far worse than anything you can imagine, and you are the one who can help us stop it." John felt his head spin. "You're asking me to believe that I'm somehow the savior of an alien race?" He laughed nervously, though it didn't feel funny. "This can't be real." "It is real," Lyra said firmly. "And you will see that soon enough. But there is more you must understand. The connection between us is not just physical. It is deeper, woven into the fabric of both our worlds." John didn't know how to respond. Part of him wanted to believe her. Her sincerity was undeniable, but another part of him couldn't accept it. This was just too much. He had no training in saving alien species, no knowledge of how to defeat a mysterious dark force. He was just an engineer. What could he possibly do? Lyra seemed to sense his doubt. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I know this is overwhelming, but I will help you understand. I've waited for you for so long. You are not alone in this. You have a destiny, John." He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts racing in his mind. I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know what it means." "You don't have to know everything right now," Lyra said gently. "But you will learn. You will grow. And together, we will face whatever comes." John stared at her, his mind still in chaos. But somewhere deep inside, a part of him wanted to believe her. The strange connection he felt toward her couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just a random person who had walked into his life. She was part of something much bigger. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steadying. "I'll trust you, but I need more than just words. I need to understand what's really going on." Lyra smiled, the kind of smile that seemed to light up the entire park. "You will. The journey is just beginning, John, and I promise, you won't regret it." As he looked at her, John realized that his life would never be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and mysteries. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt before: hope. John couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just begun a new chapter, one that was far stranger than anything he could have imagined. For the past few days, he had been trying to wrap his mind around the idea of an alien woman claiming he was part of her species' prophecy. It sounded like something out of a movie, but here he was, standing in the middle of a quiet park with Lyra, trying to process everything she had told him. As they walked side by side, Lyra explained more about her world and the danger her people were facing. She had been careful with her words, taking her time to make him understand. John listened, though every part of him was still skeptical. His mind kept running in circles, questioning everything. Her home planet, she told him, was called Aloria. It was a world unlike Earth, where the air shimmered with energy and the land was alive in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The people of Aloria were advanced, their technology far beyond anything on Earth, but all their progress had come at a cost. For centuries, they had been at war with an alien race known as the Draxans. The Draxans were ruthless, a species that thrived on destruction, and they had been relentless in their attacks on Aloria. The war had drained the planet of resources and left its people on the brink of extinction. "You see, John," Lyra explained softly, "the prophecy speaks of a human who will come to our aid, a man who will bring about the end of the Draxan threat. That man is you." John's heart raced at the mention of the Draxans. "How can I help? I don't even know anything about fighting aliens or saving planets. I'm just me." Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. Her purple eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, intense but full of something like hope. "That's the point, John. You don't have to be a soldier or a hero. The prophecy says you will lead us, not with strength, but with your heart. Your courage will guide us. Your connection to me will be the key to ending the war." John rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't know what to say. I can't just step into this kind of role. This is too much. I'm not even sure I believe any of this." Lyra took a step closer to him, her presence calming. "I know it's overwhelming. It's hard for you to believe, but it's true. I've seen the future, John. I've seen you standing by my side, helping us defeat the Draxans. You don't have to believe me now, but soon you will." He looked at her, still unsure. "And what happens to me? What happens to my life? I have a job, family, friends. What about all that?" Lyra's eyes softened. "You won't lose everything. Your world, Earth, is still important. You'll be able to balance both, but first, you must understand what's at stake. The Draxans are already preparing their final strike. If we don't act now, Aloria will fall, and so will Earth." John felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of her words hit him harder than he expected. He had never been one for responsibility, much less the fate of an entire planet. But there was something in Lyra's voice, something in the way she spoke that made him want to trust her. He had no idea why, but he couldn't ignore the pull between them. It felt as though they were connected by something greater than just words. "What do I need to do?" he asked quietly, feeling a sense of resignation and resolve settle over him. Lyra smiled, the corners of her lips curling up in a way that made John's heart skip. "You're ready to learn. But first, you must understand the weapon that we have against the Draxans. It's not what you think." John furrowed his brow. "Weapon? You said something about a weapon before. What is it?" "It's you," Lyra replied, her voice steady and filled with certainty. "The bond we share, the prophecy, it's all connected. You and I are linked, John. Our connection will unlock the power we need to defeat the Draxans." John stepped back slightly, a knot forming in his stomach. "You're saying that our relationship is the key to saving your people? That's a lot to take in." Lyra's eyes softened again, and she reached out to gently touch his arm. "I know it's hard, but together, we are stronger than you can imagine. The connection between us will allow us to tap into a power that the Draxans can't even comprehend. It's not about just physical strength. It's about unity, love, and trust." John didn't know how to respond to that. Love? He didn't know her like that, and yet, everything she said felt important. She spoke of a bond, of a connection that went beyond mere words. It felt real, even if he couldn't fully understand it. "We'll begin your training soon," Lyra continued. "You need to learn how to harness the power within you. But first, we need to prepare for the Draxan invasion. It's closer than you think." John nodded slowly, though his mind was still racing. The idea of training for an intergalactic battle was almost too much to handle. But he knew he had no choice. Now. There was a purpose to his life. Something bigger than himself. Something he couldn't run from. The two of them spent the rest of the evening walking through the park, talking more about the coming battle and the steps John needed to take. As the night grew darker, John found himself more and more willing to believe in the impossible. Maybe this wasn't just some random event. Maybe he really was a part of something greater, something that could save not just one world, but two. As they parted ways that evening, Lyra turned to him one last time, her eyes filled with determination. "Tomorrow we start your training, and soon you'll understand just how important you are, John." John watched her walk away, his heart heavy but hopeful. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same. The battle was coming, and he had a role to play. He just hoped he was ready. The following days felt like a whirlwind for John. After his conversation with Lyra, he had hoped things might slow down, but instead, they only sped up. He tried to focus on his work, but even his mind couldn't stay on the blueprints or the upcoming deadlines. Every thought led back to Lyra and the strange future she had promised him. His world had been turned upside down, and now there was no going back. Lyra had kept her word. The next morning, she arrived at his apartment, just as promised. She was dressed in the same sleek, metallic clothing, the silver of her suit gleaming in the sunlight. Her presence was as commanding as ever, but there was something different this time. There was a sense of urgency in the air that hadn't been there before. The war with the Draxons was real, and it was coming faster than John had imagined. "I'm ready," John said, though the words felt strange as they left his mouth. He didn't feel ready. How could he be? He was just an ordinary guy. But looking at Lyra with her unwavering confidence and that intense look in her purple eyes, he couldn't back down now. There was no turning back. Lyra nodded. "I know you are. The first lesson will be about trust. Trust in yourself and in the bond we share. The power between us is unlike anything you can imagine, but it's only effective when we work together." John's heart was pounding as they made their way to a secluded area in a park near his apartment. It was quiet, the sounds of the city, far away, which gave him a small sense of peace amidst the chaos in his mind. "Close your eyes," Lyra instructed. "Focus on your breathing. Clear your mind." John did as she said, closing his eyes and taking deep breaths. The world around him seemed to fade into the background as he focused on the steady rhythm of his breath. He had never been one for meditation, but he did his best to trust Lyra. After a few minutes, she spoke again, her voice soft and steady. "Now, imagine the connection between us. Imagine that bond we share. It's there, John. It's always been there. Feel it." At first, nothing happened. John felt silly, standing there with his eyes closed, focusing on something he wasn't sure existed. But then, slowly, something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a faint pulse of energy that seemed to echo through him. It wasn't physical, but it felt real. Like he could sense her presence in a way he hadn't before. The strange connection between them, the bond Lyra had spoken of, was becoming more tangible. "Do you feel it?" Lyra asked, her voice like a gentle pull on his. Mind, John nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I do. It's strange." "That's good," Lyra said, her voice warmer now. "This is just the beginning. The more you trust in it, the stronger it will become. The bond between us will guide us, John. It will give you the strength you need when the time comes." John opened his eyes, staring at her. She was still standing a few feet away, her expression calm but focused. The connection between them wasn't something he could explain, but he knew it was real. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. For the first time, he began to believe in this strange future she had shown him. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as ordinary as he thought. They spent the rest of the afternoon training. Or rather, Lyra teaching him how to harness this energy that seemed to flow between them. It wasn't something John could control yet, but every time he focused on it, it became easier to sense. The more they practiced, the stronger the pull between them grew. It was almost like he could feel her emotions, her determination, her hope. It was as if they were becoming one, their minds and hearts tied together by something greater than them. As the sun began to set, Lyra finally stopped, her face showing signs of exhaustion, though she tried not to let it show. "That's enough for today," she said softly. "You've made incredible progress, but we need to talk about what's coming. The Draxons won't wait." John felt a knot in his stomach tighten at the mention of the Draxons. He had been trying to push the idea of the war out of his mind, but the reality was creeping in, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had a part to play, whether he was ready or not. "What do I need to know?" he asked, his voice steady but uncertain. Lyra looked at him seriously. "The Draxons are preparing their final assault. We don't have much time. They know about the prophecy, and they're determined to stop it. They'll come for you, John. They'll try to weaken the connection between us, break our bond. That's why we need to stay close. Together, we're stronger." John felt the weight of her words. He had always been a loner, relying only on himself. Now he had to rely on Lyra, and on something he didn't completely understand. But as he looked at her, he realized that he couldn't back out now. He had already committed to this strange, terrifying future. He had to see it through. "All right," he said, his voice more confident than he felt. "What's the next step?" Lyra smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "The next step is preparing for the battle ahead. We need to gather allies, strategize, and get ready to face the Draxons. But first, we'll train more. You need to be ready, John. You need to understand the full extent of your power." John nodded, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He couldn't do it alone. The battle was coming, and with Lyra by his side, he would face whatever came next. Together, they would fight to protect their worlds. As they walked back to the apartment side by side, John couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. The journey was just beginning, and he wasn't sure if he was ready. But for the first time, he knew he wasn't alone. He had a purpose, a connection, to Lyra, and the strength to fight for something bigger than himself. And that gave him hope. The days leading up to the invasion were filled with intense preparation. John couldn't believe how quickly everything was happening. One moment, he was an ordinary engineer with a quiet life, and the next, he was standing at the center of an intergalactic conflict. Lyra had made sure that he didn't waste time doubting or questioning. She pushed him to learn, to grow, and to accept the reality that had been thrust upon him. John had been training with her for hours every day. It wasn't physical combat that Lyra focused on, but something far deeper, the bond they shared. She had explained that it was not just a mental connection, but one that reached deep into their souls. It allowed them to communicate without words, to feel each other's emotions, and to sense the movements of the Draxons. It was a powerful gift, but also a heavy responsibility. As the training went on, John found himself growing stronger. He could feel the energy between him and Lyra, pulsing with every passing moment. At times, it was overwhelming, like his very being was merging with hers. It wasn't always easy to control, but he could feel that the connection was growing more natural. They were becoming one, united by a shared purpose that seemed destined. On the morning of the 5th day, Lyra arrived at his apartment with a serious expression on her face. There was no small talk, no comforting words. She was all business. John could see the stress in her eyes, a weight she wasn't hiding well. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice tight. The Draxons are moving faster than I anticipated. They'll be here within hours. John's heart skipped a beat. He had known this day would come, but now that it was so close, it felt unreal. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steady, despite the fear that was building in his chest. Lyra stepped closer to him, her expression softened, but only slightly. "We prepare," she said simply. "The bond we share will protect you, but it's not invincible. We need to be in the right place at the right time. If we're going to win this, we have to be ahead of them." John nodded. There was no time for doubt. He had made a decision the moment he chose to trust her. The prophecy, the power between them. It was real. And he had to fight. Lyra led him to a hidden safe house, a location she had set up for their last stand. The building was located deep within a dense forest, far from the prying eyes of the city. It was a large underground bunker, equipped with everything they might need for the coming battle. As they entered, John felt a sudden rush of nerves. The weight of the situation was hitting him harder than ever. "I know you're scared," Lyra said, sensing his hesitation. "But you've already proven yourself. You're not just some ordinary man anymore. You're part of this fight, and you will make a difference." John tried to steady his breath, but the reality of her words settled deep in his chest. He wasn't ordinary anymore. He was connected to her people, to their survival. His mind raced, but he couldn't let fear take control. He had to focus. He had to fight. They spent the next few hours preparing. Lyra showed him how to use the technology her people had left behind, a combination of advanced weaponry and energy shields that would help them defend against the Draxons. It was difficult to grasp at first, but with the bond they shared, John was able to understand the principles more quickly. The connection between them allowed him to absorb knowledge almost instantly, the strange technology becoming second nature. After a while, they took a break. John sat on a bench, his hands trembling slightly from the intensity of the training. He looked at Lyra, who was busy recalibrating the energy shields. "You don't have to do this alone, John," she said without looking up. "I'm here. We're in this together." John met her gaze, and for the first time since this all began, he felt a sense of peace. Her presence was a constant reassurance, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. He had been unsure of his place in all this, but now, looking at her, he knew that they were a team. He didn't have to understand everything right away. He just had to trust her, trust in the bond they shared. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. For you, for your people. For Earth." Lyra smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "That's all I can ask for, John. You've already done more than you know. Now we just need to keep moving forward." They continued their preparations as the hours ticked by. John found himself growing more confident, more determined. With each passing moment, he felt the power between him and Lyra growing stronger. It was as though their souls were becoming intertwined, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Then, just as the sky began to darken, the alarms sounded. The Draxons were here. It was time. John's heart pounded in his chest as he and Lyra made their way to the battle station. The energy in the air was thick with tension, and John could feel his pulse quicken. This was it. The fight he had been training for was about to begin. Lyra turned to him, her expression determined. "Stay close to me. The bond will protect us, but we have to work together. If we do, we can defeat them." John nodded. The fear that had once been there was still present, but it had been replaced with something else, determination. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for a future, for a chance at peace for both their worlds. As the first wave of Draxon ships appeared in the sky, John's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. He stood tall beside Lyra, ready to face whatever came next. They had trained for this moment. They were ready, and together they would fight to the very end. John Miller had always considered himself an ordinary man. He was a 32-year-old engineer who spent most of his days hunched over blueprints, designing the future of buildings in his city. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him a simple life. He wasn't a fan of adventure or big changes, preferring the comfort of predictability. A quiet evening at home with a good book was enough to make him happy. So when he found himself at the International Space and Technology Convention one Saturday afternoon, he almost wished he hadn't bothered. It wasn't that he wasn't interested in technology or space. He just didn't think it would be a good use of his weekend. But his best friend, Matt, had insisted. "You need to get out more, John. Maybe you'll see something that sparks your imagination." John had reluctantly agreed, telling himself it would be a short trip, just to make Matt happy. The event was massive, held in a towering glass building filled with tech enthusiasts, researchers, and companies showcasing their latest innovations. John wandered from booth to booth, barely registering the displays of new gadgets and futuristic concepts. It all seemed a bit too much for him. His mind kept drifting to the project deadlines, waiting for him back at the office. That was until he met her. She wasn't like anyone he had ever seen before. Standing at a booth on the far side of the hall, the woman caught his attention instantly. She was tall, with long silver hair that shimmered like it held its own light. Her eyes were a strange, glowing purple, almost unnerving but mesmerizing at the same time. She wore a suit of metallic blue and silver that looked too sleek, almost futuristic for Earth. The moment their eyes met, John felt a strange, inexplicable pull toward her. She was talking to a small group of people when he approached, but the moment she noticed him, her conversation stopped. The crowd dispersed almost as if they had been dismissed, and her intense gaze locked on him. John, flustered, looked away and tried to act casual, not sure why his heart was racing. "You," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "You are the one." John raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" he asked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "The one. The man I meant to marry," she said, her eyes still fixed on him as though it were the most obvious statement in the world. John froze. This woman was either incredibly confident or completely insane. He glanced around nervously, half expecting to see hidden cameras. Was this some kind of prank? Was someone playing a joke on him? "Are you serious?" he asked, chuckling awkwardly. "I don't even know who you are." "I am Lyra," she replied, a smile tugging at her lips, though it seemed like she knew something. He didn't. "And I've come to Earth to fulfill my destiny. You are my future husband." John laughed a little louder this time, trying to brush off the absurdity of the situation. "I think you've got the wrong guy. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested." Lyra's expression didn't change. She stepped closer, her presence suddenly overwhelming in a way that was hard to explain. The air felt heavier, as though the world had shifted just by her being near. She reached into a bag at her side and pulled out a small, shimmering device, which she pressed into his hand. It was cool to the touch, like metal from another world. "Take this," she said softly. "It's proof. I know it's difficult to believe, but it's true. You are my future." John stared at the device, a complex pattern glowing on its surface. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. He was no expert in alien technology, but he knew enough to recognize that this wasn't a typical piece of Earth equipment. He handed it back to her, his fingers shaking. "This is insane," John muttered. "Look, I don't know what you're playing at, but I'm not playing," she interrupted, her tone still calm but firm. "You and I are bound by a prophecy that was foretold centuries ago. The fate of my people and yours depends on you." John blinked, still unsure how to react. He looked at the device again, his mind struggling to process her words. Could this be real? Was this woman really telling him that he was somehow important to her species? The thought was so far out of his realm of understanding that it made him dizzy. "Listen," he said, backing away slightly. "I think you've got the wrong person. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not some hero or whatever you think I am. I've got my life, and it's complicated enough without whatever this is." Lyra didn't seem fazed by his rejection. She simply smiled and placed the device back in her bag. "You will come to understand soon enough," she said cryptically. "Your life is about to change, John Miller. You may not believe me now, but you will soon." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving John standing in the middle of the convention hall, his head spinning. Was this a joke? A prank? Or was it something more? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The strange encounter had left him uneasy, but also curious. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lyra and to his future than he had ever imagined. As he left the convention, his mind was filled with questions. Who was she really? And why had she chosen him? The Draxan ships filled the sky, dark and menacing, their engines humming with deadly power. John stood beside Lyra, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The air around them was tense, thick with anticipation. He could feel the bond between him and Lyra pulsing, the connection that had grown stronger with each passing day. It was as if their very beings were aligned, ready to face the coming storm together. Lyra's eyes were fixed on the sky, her expression calm, but intense. She had been through this before, but for John, this was his first real battle. His heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline surging through his veins. He had trained for this moment, but nothing could fully prepare him for the sight of the enemy ships descending toward them. "They're coming," Lyra said softly, her voice steady. "Get ready." John nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but there was no turning back now. The fate of both. Their worlds rested on what happened next. The first blast hit the ground not far from them, sending a shock wave through the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and John instinctively flinched, but Lyra remained unfazed. She raised her hand, and the energy shield around them flared to life, a shimmering barrier of light that absorbed the blast. The Draxans were here, and they weren't wasting any time. "Stay close," Lyra instructed, her voice sharp. "Don't let them break our bond. We can't let them get to us." John's heart raced as the first wave of Draxans stormed the ground, their armored figures moving swiftly, weapons raised. They were like nothing John had ever seen, alien, ruthless, and determined. But Lyra's presence beside him gave him a sense of calm. He could feel her strength, her confidence, and he knew that together they could face this threat. He raised the weapon Lyra had given him, a sleek energy rifle that hummed with power. The bond between them allowed him to instinctively understand how to use it, the weapon almost becoming an extension of his own body. He fired, the energy blast striking one of the Draxans dead on. The creature collapsed to the ground, its body smoking from the impact. Lyra was beside him, her own weapon flashing with bursts of energy as she fired at the Draxan forces. She moved with incredible speed and precision, her actions almost graceful despite the chaos around them. John marveled at her skill, the way she seemed to anticipate every move, every shot. But there was no time for admiration. The battle was fierce, and the Draxans were relentless. The air was filled with the sounds of explosions, the clash of energy shields, and the crackle of gunfire. John's hands were steady now, the fear that had once gripped him slowly fading away. With every blast he fired, he felt more and more in sync with Lyra, their movements almost coordinated. It was as if the bond between them was guiding him, telling him where to aim, when to fire, when to move. But the Draxons weren't backing down. They kept coming, more of them appearing from the ships in the sky. John could feel the strain of the battle on his body, his muscles aching, his energy draining. He glanced at Lyra, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. She gave him a small nod, and in that instant, he understood. They were in this together, and no matter how many Draxons came, they would fight until the end. The sky above them darkened as more ships arrived, blocking out the sun. It was a full-scale invasion now, and John could feel the pressure mounting. The bond between him and Lyra pulsed with urgency, as if calling on him to do something more. He didn't know what that was, but he could feel the answer deep inside him. A loud roar broke through the chaos, and John turned to see a massive Draxon warship descending. It was unlike anything he had seen before, huge, dark, and heavily armed. He could feel the weight of it, the threat it posed to everything he and Lyra had worked for. But there was no time for hesitation. "Lyra!" John shouted over the noise, his voice barely audible. "What do we do now?" Lyra's face was set in a determined expression. "We take them down, together." With a single motion, she activated. A special device strapped to her wrist, and a beam of concentrated energy shot toward the warship. The beam hit its target, but the ship didn't falter. Instead, it fired back, sending a blast of energy straight toward them. John's heart stopped for a moment as the blast came closer. But before he could react, the bond between him and Lyra flared to life, a surge of power flowing through him. The energy shield surrounding them grew brighter, stronger, absorbing the blast. It felt like an explosion of light, and for a moment, everything went silent. When the light faded, John looked up to see the Draxon warship wobbling in midair. It had been hit, the damage clear in the smoke rising from its hull. Lyra's device had done its job, but it wasn't enough. The ship was still operational. "We need to finish it," Lyra said, her voice resolute. She didn't hesitate, charging toward the ship with a speed that seemed impossible. John followed, his body moving almost on its own as the bond between them urged him forward. They reached the warship, and with a coordinated strike, they sent another wave of energy into its core. This time, there was no resistance. The ship exploded in a brilliant burst of light, sending debris scattering across the battlefield. For a moment, everything was still. The Draxons stopped advancing, their forces stunned by the loss of their warship. John and Lyra stood side by side, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits high. They had done it. The battle wasn't over, but this victory was a turning point. John looked at Lyra, and for the first time since this all began, he saw the weight of the battle in her eyes. But there was something else there, too. Hope. They had done the impossible, and together, they had proven that their bond was more than just a connection. It was the strength they needed to overcome the greatest of odds. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, John felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would fight, and together, they would win.